Hey folks, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. This week we're going to be covering composition because it's really important that your subject matter is where you want it to be and your focus for your viewer is where it needs to be. Having a clear subject is really important when shooting moving water. And it's really important to make sure that our viewer knows exactly what that subject is. And good composition helps us succeed in that. There are 1,000 different rules for composition when it comes to all kinds of other photography, and a lot of them for me don't apply when shooting moving water. Moving water is all about flow and rhythm and feel, and so the rules are a little bit different. I like to make sure that an image has good flow and good movement through the image, and so tonight we're going to go over the things that I think make for successful moving water images, and we're going to talk about different compositional tools and elements that I try to put together in all my images when I'm out in the field. It's all about how my mind is seeing it, and it's not about how anyone else sees it. So I hope you follow along with me this evening as we go over rules of composition or compositional tools that I like to use when I'm out in the field. I hope you'll forgive the loud and gaudy Hawaiian shirt. I should be sitting on a beach in Hawaii right now and not talking to the camera. But with the way things are, I'm here, so let's go ahead and get back on up to the studio and get started. Okay, so as we get started with this episode, I want to preface this by saying this is just my opinion. There's a whole bunch of resources out there that will probably tell me I'm wrong about a lot of this, and that's okay. This is my opinion. This is how I see the scenes when I'm out shooting moving water. And so I'm just sharing my insight and my workflow for this with y'all on this episode. And hey, it's my channel. I can talk about it how I want to do it. But, you know, it's really just, it's a personal thing. But I'm going to go over what I'm looking for when I'm shooting out in rivers and streams and creeks and at waterfalls, because I do that a lot. So, starting with the only bad image that I'm going to show you, because I don't see a whole lot of point in spending a lot of time talking about bad images. I would rather show you the ones that I feel like they are successful and work better than showing you a bunch of bad ones and say, hey, don't do that. It's more about, hey, maybe try to do it this way and you might have a little better success. This is an image that I have used one from this shoot in a previous episode, but not this image, because this image wasn't very good. This image for me is not successful for two reasons. One is we have this large area right here that is all kind of, it's fairly featureless. It's not really doing anything to tell us part of the story, and it's just not really working, in my opinion. It just doesn't have much there. There's not a lot of interest. There's really nothing going on. But we also have a problem of, if this is the center point of the image, this stuff is all leading your eye out this way, and this stuff is all leading your eye out this way. So the water is coming down, and it spills down over the rocks. It gets to here, and then it goes this way, and some of it's coming this way and going down. That's making the eye choose which direction to go. The flow of the image, for me, is not good. It is not appealing. It's too chaotic. It's trying to force the eye to go two different directions. And for me, my eyes can't go two different directions at one time, so it makes it a bad image, in my opinion. The fact that the water flow is going in two different directions, it's not flowing through the image, and it's not working. So this is what I see as a bad image. To make this scene better, I move to the left and pan the camera around to the left and let the water move right to left through the scene. So that's one image that I find to be an unsuccessful image, and now we're going to go through some that I find more successful. Alright, up next on the composition tour, working with diagonal lines. I like to sometimes work with a diagonal line that goes from one corner to the other when I'm shooting really big waterfalls. I don't get to do that very often, but this shot at Bald River Falls in Tennessee is one of them. This falls is actually really big, and I scrambled out onto the rocks when the water level was lower, and I composed this to let the water come in from the top right and move its way down to the bottom left. The general flow of this image is from top right down to bottom left. All of the water comes down and spills this direction and ends up going down this direction. It's letting the water have somewhere to go and be consistent about it. All of the little tendrils of water are all going in the same direction. For me, this is a composition that works. Everything funnels back down to this corner. It all enters up here and it all leaves down here. That's working with a really diagonal composition on a really big waterfall. This was shot at 17 millimeters and it is the full frame. There's no cropping. I couldn't get any more of the falls in this image. So that's a diagonal composition. In this example, I'm shooting another really big waterfall, but I'm shooting it from further away. I'm shooting it from more of a distance so that I can include more of the surrounding area in the frame. And what I've done in this one is I have placed the main waterfall in the upper half of the image. Here, the upper falls is in the upper half of the image. I've left this little bit of sky in a V shape that's pointing down to the falls, and all of the water is coming toward me around this rock and then out this way, and around this rock and out this way and out the bottom. I've used a little bit of a circular polarizer to be able to see underneath the rocks here, or underneath the water, shall I say, and see this rock that is under the water here. But overall, the flow of the image is the eye comes down through here, down the waterfall, and funnels all of the water out and around. I like doing this when I have a big waterfall that's a big element, and let it splash into its splash pool that then feeds down to the rest of the image. For me, this rock and this rock are nice mid-ground and foreground anchors, and the water is flowing right out of the bottom of the frame. Now you might ask, earlier you said that the water going out two different sides was kind of distracting. That was when the water was going out in the middle of the frame. In this, the water is leaving out of both corners of the frame and the middle. It's just leaving right out of the bottom of the frame, and that kind of works with the flow of a waterfall and the flow of a creek in my mind. I could be wrong, but that's just how I see it. This is what I like to do when I'm working with a bigger waterfall. And sometimes, to go back to our exposures and shutter speeds, sometimes I will shoot the waterfall at one shutter speed. For this area, might have a shutter speed of 2 to 3 seconds. And down here, I might want to keep a little more of the texture, so my shutter speed down here might be more of 0.5 seconds. And then I'll blend those two together. That's putting all of the things that we've been discussing all into one frame, blending different strengths in the circular polarizer filter, blending shutter speeds, and working with composition all in one image. And this is one of my favorite images of Cloudland Canyon from several years ago. Alright, on to one of my favorite images from 2019, shot in Tremont during my fall color trip. This is an image titled Whale Tail for obvious reasons, but we're going to go over what I feel to be the successful compositional tools used in this image. For me, I split this image to start with in thirds Forgive me, these are not going to be perfect. And let the top of the falls, the top of the white part of the water, start at the top third of the frame, right roughly in the middle of the frame. And I did this because in the field I could tell that the dark green of the trees was coming in from this side. The dark green of the trees was coming in with an angle of this nature from that side. These rocks all pointed this direction. And this cathedral of fall color up here all worked in a V shape, kind of leading the eye down to here. And that just made for a natural point to start the water. And then the water, we'll go ahead and change colors to make this a little more legible. And then the water filters its way through all of the rocks and areas and comes down this way, and it all ends right here at my primary focus element. This is my primary subject right here. This is what looks like a tail of a whale underneath the water. And then all the water kind of leaves out of this corner. And that's the visual flow of this image. Everything brings you to here, and then the water takes you back out. And the water kind of catches you here and kind of maybe brings you back around. This little bit of water brings you up the tree, over those branches of that rhododendron, and leads you right back to here, where it comes down and you get the little turtle head. Here he is. Here's his little smile and his little eyeball. And then here's his little back with all of his little bumps on it. But all of that leads you back up here and start all over again. It's an image that lets the eye continue to work through and discover little things. Maybe the second or third time through you see these little highlights in that wonderful green moss that's all along the riverbank. This is just it's an image that, for me, it's okay to have the center point or the starting point of the image right there in the center vertically, and then it's on the horizontal at the third point. So that's an image that the composition, everything leads the eye to a point. Work with it. I had tried to shoot this image from right over in here, and it didn't have the same effect. This was too low in the frame. I tried shooting it from further back, and the prominence of this feature was lost. So I worked this scene from 3 or 4 different angles with several different lenses, and this is the one that came out the best to my eye, and it's because I worked with the natural features of the environment. Okay, moving on to the next example. This is an example that I feel uses leading lines. Some might not see it that way, but to my eye, there's a leading line that comes in from this corner straight across this image and to this tree. And this tree is my primary subject in this frame. It is not the water. The water is a secondary subject matter that leads me to my primary point of focus. Everything was done on this image to highlight and accent that tree. As I was driving through on the Tremont Road last fall, that tree stuck out to me from across the road and across the river. I hadn't ever noticed it before, had never seen it before, and never photographed it before. I stopped the car, turned around, and had to come back to it. And I spent several long minutes there, actually probably over an hour the first night of that trip. And then I came back to it every night for the next 2 nights, trying to recreate an image that I ended up getting best on my first try, and that's this one. In my opinion, leading lines are one of the most misunderstood and often misused tools of composition in photography. People often think that all you need is some lines that go across the frame like that, and you've got leading lines. Well, I disagree with that. I think leading lines are only useful if they lead you to something. Just because you've got lots of lines going through an image doesn't mean it's successful leading lines. And for me, this image starts out with this little bright patch of water that leads you to the little gap between this rock, this rock, this rock, and this rock, and connects you to this water and this highlight here. Our eyes are always drawn to the brightest part of an image, and in this image, obviously the brighter part is the water. So the water, our eye picks up on this water here and leads us to this water, and then we filter all the way across and to this big dominant trunk of this tree. The little water on the side kind of filters you in here as well. This water was all shot at a longer shutter speed so that it had less texture in it, so that that texture wouldn't be distracting or take away from what I was trying to do, and that's lead the eye up through the image and to this tree. I'm a big fan of leading people in from a corner, whether it be one corner or both corners. The last image, I had stuff leading in from every corner. Some people don't like that too, but I do. I like leading the eye in from a corner. I think it works well. I think the eye goes to corners and comes in from there. But in this one, I'm leading the eye across using the water to interconnect everything to my primary subject, which is the tree. But I'm also making decisions about circular polarizer, non-circular polarizer. In this one, I used every bit of the circular polarizer so that all of the glare on the water in this area would be gone and would go away and highlight just the little white parts of the white water. That way they all interconnect and lead over to, again, my primary subject, which is that big, gorgeous tree. So sometimes leading the eye with the water or using the water as an element to lead the viewer to your actual subject is a great tool when shooting in conditions like this. That tree could be a dogwood. This particular area in the spring, the focus is the dogwoods. So connect all the little bits of white water to bring the eye over to the primary focus point, which is a dogwood or some other great tree or a rhododendron that's blooming. The water elements don't always have to be the main feature. They can be secondary features that lead the eye to the main feature. So think about that when you're out shooting the next time. All right, I'm going to close this episode on the channel with this image and this concept, and that is, don't just shoot your waterfall or rapids or whatever it is that you have your camera pointed at. Don't just shoot it from one point or one location. Work the scene, move around, shoot it from different angles, different compositions, different spots along the river. It's not always going to be the first place that you plop your tripod down that ends up being the best image. When I first got to this spot along the middle prong, I thought this was going to be a great spot to take a photograph from. In the field, I liked this great big rock here. I liked all this leading the eye right on up into that way. I thought these were leading over that way and this was coming in from that way. And I thought it was going to be a good spot. But when I got back into the studio, I really didn't like it. I didn't care for all of this junk down here. This wasn't helping. I didn't really like that stick there. It was kind of like, hey, what are you doing there? I didn't really like this tree being right next to the edge of the frame. I didn't like this tree being right next to the edge of the frame. So I didn't really like this image and this composition. But thankfully, I moved up on the river to a different spot. And you can kind of see it here. I moved up into here and shot this composition. And this composition, to me, is much more successful. The shelf leads the eye over to the waterfall. The dark green of the mountain laurel has this shape that leads the eye over. This rock is funneling the eye in this direction. This little bit of fall color grabs your attention up top, and all the trees bring you back down to this line that brings you over to here. And then you get to appreciate the water cascading over that element, down in between these two rocks, down into this little splash pool, and eventually on out the bottom of the frame. But you might get stuck right here and come right back around and do it all over again. You might come in from this corner and then you land here, and then you can come and do it all over again. It's all about keeping the viewer's eye on an image for longer. If a viewer comes up and looks at the image and is done in 2 seconds, to me that wasn't as successful as it could have been if you keep the viewer's eye moving around the frame, discovering new things. It's always a good idea to see if your composition helps to further that goal of keeping the eye on the frame, keep the eye moving around, and keep them discovering new things. If they continue to discover new things every time they start looking through an image, they're going to be more engaged with that image. And to me, that is a more successful image. When I go to gallery openings and art shows and competitions, as a casual observer, I kind of watch and see which images patrons spend more time at, which ones garner more attention from the people that are looking at the pictures, because not all of them are photographers. Some of the people are patrons. They might be looking to purchase something. And if you sit back and watch, there are some times where people will stay on an image and look at it and you can see it, and sometimes they'll point at it and you can see where their eye is moving around and, hey, I didn't see this little detail before. So it's all about keeping the viewer engaged in the photograph. And while it looks like it might be a busy photograph, this one does a good job, in my opinion, of keeping the eye moving and keeping the viewer engaged. And that's a composition that you really want to work on, is keeping the eye moving around, keeping the viewer engaged with the photograph, because that will make it more successful and it'll make them want to look at it longer. I don't want anyone to come up to my image and be done with it 2 seconds later. I'd be much happier if they're looking at it a minute and a half, 2 minutes later, still going, hey, look at that little detail. So just keep that in mind when you're composing your shots out in the field. But also, don't just shoot the scene from one spot. Move around. It's always a good idea to change your composition up. Move your feet, move your tripod, try a different lens. I mean, megabytes on memory cards are free these days. It's not like we're shooting film where every one of them, to develop it, it's going to cost you money. It's free megabytes, so use them up. And what that will help is, in the long run, you'll be able to walk up to a scene and just know that's not going to work. That stick is in the way. You know, I felt stupid that I missed it on this other one, but I had both images to work with, so I saved myself by having different angles on the same subject. That way, when I got back to the studio, I could decide which one worked better. As always, thanks for tuning in this week. If you like this video, please hit that thumbs up button, leave me a comment down in the comment section, let me know how I'm doing. If you haven't already subscribed, please do, and hit that bell to get notifications every time I upload a new video. Until next week, may the good light find you. Thanks.